we can officially begin. Last week we talked about AC. You guys are pretty good with that. So we're going to finish off with AC. And so you have to understand alternating current before you can understand what we're going to talk about this week for the most part. Then we got to understand what we're talking about this week for the most part, to understand what we're going to be talking about next week. Because next week we'll get into magnetos in depth. And I thought about kind of moving it around and saying, hey, well, maybe we'll switch magnetos to this week. But you got to understand transformers before you can understand. Before you can understand magnetos. What'd you do to me? There it is. All right. All right, transformers. It is often said that transformers are more than meets the eye. That's a bad joke with the white thing. So. What's that?
Aren't they also robots in disguise?
They are robots in disguise. They really are. All right. So, all right. One of the big advantages of using electrical power, AC power over DC, is that with AC we have the ability to manipulate it and to do different things with it. As we're DC, not so much, right? We talked about with DC going through a conductor with Lenz's law. We only had an issue with Lenz's law twice in the DC circuit, and that is when we turned it on, when we turned it off. All right, so with AC, so one big advantage of using AC, alternating current, is the ability to use transformers to step up or step down voltage. To step up or step down voltage. I don't know. Does anybody know what PG&E or SMUD kicks out from the power plant? Electricity. He is not wrong. Thank you for that. I think it is. Somewhere around 12,000 volts. It's a little less coming out of the wall. Although my car would charge much faster at 12,000 volts. But obviously it leaves there, and you have the what's that? Done. It leaves there, and then it goes through transformers. You've seen the transformers up on the pole, the big round things, right? Those are transformers, and that steps down the voltage to something that's more usable. And of course, they're changed at stations. They go to actually to a station where it's transformed, then to low tension power lines. So there's different stages it goes through. So that's what happens there. So all right, definitions. A transformer is a device used to increase or decrease voltage in a circuit. So a transformer is a device, E-V-I-C-E, device, used to increase, I kind of already said that, increase or decrease voltage in a circuit. It does so through electromagnetic induction. So a device that transfers energy from one circuit to another by, we'll just put, does this through electromagnetic induction. So last week we talked about coils, inductors, right? Well, really a transformer is nothing more than taking an inductor, a coil, and now doing something useful with it. Because last week we just had this inductor. It's like, what are you doing with it? I don't know, it's just there. Don't worry about it. Well, this week we're going to talk about what we're doing with it. And so if we go back several weeks, we had relays and the other thing, the solenoids. Help me out. It's interactive. So relays and solenoids, right? And so a relay or a solenoid in a DC device was a coil, right? And so when we turned on the coil from a battery, with a switch that is now closed, and we ran DC current through there. Lenz's law, of course, happened twice, which was on and off. But what happens when it's on outside of Lenz's law? We got magnetic lines of flux. Remember that? You guys are so entertaining and interactive. We created an electromagnet with this thing. And that electromagnet was used to do what? Control the relay. Closed contact points. Click. Magnetic force pulled them down. So we know that we have magnetic lines of flux, which we've talked about, going through an inductor. And we also know that these magnetic lines of flux tend to create a little bit of havoc with the coil as we analyze with our AC circuits. But thankfully, we don't have to worry about that this week. We're just going to talk about what it does. So given the fact that we have this magnetic lines of flux right here, right? So it's going to build up, and it's there. And now it's stable. And so because it's not doing anything, just it's there, it's not moving. So if we don't have movement across a coil, we don't have this Lenz's law problem that we talked about, which is where it all comes from. So it builds up, it just stays there. Well, with a transformer, what we're going to do is we're going to create another coil next to it. And instead of having a battery, get rid of our battery, we'll change this into an AC generator, an AC power supply. So same idea, now we just have AC. So what we have is a coil, again, that is now building up a magnetic field and collapsing a magnetic field. Building it up, collapsing, building it up, collapsing. And so, because we have the current flow, building out, collapsing. What is it doing to the coil next to it? So we've just parked the coil next to it. It's not touching it. It's not part of the same circuit. We'll come over here and put a load on it. There we go, a little load, a light bulb. So because it is constantly expanding and collapsing, expanding and collapsing, we have a magnetic field that is moving across wires, which then creates current flow. There we go. You see a little light? Okay, so we have current flow. So now we got current flow in, we'll call this circuit B over here. We can call this circuit A and circuit B. So now we have current flow actually in B where it's not touching anything. It's not touching the generator. There's no wires connecting it. In fact, we just have some air moving along through there. I don't see any examples just laying around, but you probably have one in your pocket. Little iPhone chargers. Mm-hmm. Same thing. So that's what we're going to be. That's what we're talking about. So what does this consist of? So transformer. Well, let's see. I got some definitions here. Let me see. I already do that. Yeah, definitions. Now we're up to 3. 3. Transformer consists of a primary winding. The one that has the power is going to be the primary winding. I should say the power. The one that we can put on the first coil. Coil number 1 would be our primary winding, right there. Primary winding. Primary winding. We will have a secondary winding. Secondary winding, which will be the winding over here. Number 2 wire. Then often we will have some sort of core. Now in my example, What is between the two?
Air.
Air. So that'd be an air core, which would be the standard. Or I could put, and often you'll see the word I'm looking for, transformer drawn with two lines in between. That's indicating the core material. So we'll have a core. Often, well, it can be air, but usually, and what we're going to look at more than anything is a core that is made out of soft iron. Something that magnetic lines of flux can easily transfer through, also known as high permeability. It is usually laminated. What does laminated mean? It's layered. So just take a thin piece of soft iron and another piece, sandwich. It's a metal sandwich with no mayonnaise.
Soft iron work better than air?
Yes, because remember, air is a dielectric. So the lines of flux don't necessarily want to go through air, but they absolutely love going through metal, something that's a soft iron.
The laminations are what cause the ridges, right?
Causes the ridges. Unless there's a wear mark, which you're talking about magnetos, right? So.
Yeah, the question I was asking you the other day about.
Yeah, so if you have, well, what he's talking about is a magneto, and so if you have a surface and then a iron core that's right here, and it wears in, you'll get a ridge, but at the same time you have all the laminations, which will also cause a feeling of ridges, but those aren't the ridges that they're talking about. Okay, so why?
Just
What?
one piece of soft iron on top of the other, nothing really holding them together. They're just stacked.
Stacked. Well, you can glue them together.
Doesn't that change?
Well, they've got to be. Well, you can't just let them fall apart, so they got to be kind of stacked and pushed. So, like sometimes they're pushed into something, but well, they're wrapped. But for the most part,
I think you're saying that they're not insulated from each other.
It's probably better that
That's one of the two areas.
People, you know, they have the ridges on them. Yes. The that's laminations. Same with the horseshoes inside. I can't even feel those.
It says, why is soft iron core laminated?
yeah. But you did do that to it.
Yeah.
So here's a coil. This is called a coil assembly, not a coil assembly. Why is it called an assembly? Because it's made of many different parts. It has soft iron core, part number one. A primary winding is part number two. Part number three. Secondary winding. All right, we'll talk about those windings a little bit more, but you can see right here is the soft iron core, and it is held together, laminated. I can't pick those apart. I don't know exactly how they got it to do that, but it's not being held together by the coil, I don't think.
So would it be wrong to call the coil assembly a transformer?
It's what it is. But if you go around calling it a transformer, they're probably going to wonder why you're doing that. Who called that? Nobody else calls it that. Here's another one. I think this came out of the microwave. He gave it to me. Hey, there you go. You need this, Kevin? Yeah, sure. I definitely need that one. Usually laminated. Well, why laminations? Now we've gone off on this tangent about them being laminated. Because laminations prevent eddy currents. And you're thinking, of course, no one know eddy currents. What are eddy currents? Well, eddy currents are small circular currents that develop in metal and add resistance to the metal. So they're actually like swirling little currents that happen. And you don't want that. And we're going to, in fact, in a couple weeks, 6 weeks or so from now, we're going to talk a lot about non-destructive testing, where we use eddy currents to actually perform some work and help us do non-destructive testing. But for now, they're bad. Eddy currents are small, like little tornadoes. Small circular currents within a conductor or core. Within a conductor or core. Eddy currents. Add resistance, power loss, and heat. Add resistance, power loss, and heat. That's not a good thing. Unless it's winter time and you're trying to heat the seats in your car, then resistance and heat are a good thing. But other than that, not so much. All right, so let's circle around to what I told you, and we will write some notes. Principles of operation. Well, we know that conductors have a magnetic field when current flows.
Trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty.
I know. When current flows. All right, so if this magnetic field, which expands outside of the conductor, outside of the wire, outside of the coil that we have, when it cuts through a wire while expanding or contracting, then induction happens. Same thing, or we can talk about, let's see, conductors have magnetic fields, so we're talking about electromagnetism. Obviously, we can do the same thing if we just take conductors and I had a magnet and I ran it across here, other than the one inside, I'm going to get current flow in the little wires. But this time we're talking about electromagnetism, right? So we've got an AC generator, current flows, and we get the expanding and contracting magnetic field through the wire. So B. Where am I at? If this magnetic field, field cuts, we say cuts through a wire, or we say through a second wire if you want, through a wire, while expanding or contracting, induction happens. Which again is to say that we have wire A, which is our primary coil now. When current flows through that and expands and contracts, there's a magnetic field, and that cuts across the second one. I know you're going to shoot me because you're cuts across the second one. When it cuts across the second one, the expanding and contracting magnetic field, we get induction in the secondary. Now we've got current flow in the secondary. So in a transformer, as AC is fed into the primary winding, a magnetic field expands and contracts around the primary winding. So in a transformer, as AC is fed into the primary, winding, a magnetic field expands and contracts around that primary winding. if another coil, which is called the secondary, so if another coil which we'll call the secondary, is placed within the field of the primary, am I going too fast?
You're good.
Within the field of the primary, a voltage will be induced within the secondary, and thus current flow. I'll let you catch up. All right, pop quiz.
Oh, man.
I know.
11.
Let's see. If here's our circuit. If it looks like that, how much current flows through B?
Zero.
None. But wait a minute, we just said that we have A, we have current flowing through A, right? And we have this expansion and contraction. And we said that if that expansion and contraction goes across another coil, wires, then you're going to have induction. So if I have induction, how much current do I have flowing?
We wouldn't really be flowing because the circuit's open.
Got it.
It'd
It's
be
open.
there, but
It's
it wouldn't
nothing.
go anywhere.
It's getting to nothing.
Still happy.
Still an open circuit. Going back to week 1 stuff. All right, you passed. Yeah. All right. So give yourself a little happy face. And I bring that up because the next point I write here is not entirely true, but the one after that is. So if the secondary is placed into a circuit, let's see if the secondary is placed into a circuit, meaning a complete circuit. So my little drawing there where I erased the light bulb, is that a circuit? Not really, it's not a complete circuit. So it's got to be a complete circuit. Current will flow. Current will flow. If the secondary is not connected to a load, is not connected to a load, no current will flow in the secondary. This is the fun part. You ready? How much current flows in the primary is an interesting point.
Whatever the power source is.
You would think. So that would be to say that we take your little cell phone charger and you plug it into the wall. How much power does that consume when you don't have your phone plugged into it? Or do you guys just unplug it every time? Like, I'm not wasting power.
That was feedback.
It's very little, actually. Very little. They tell you don't plug that stuff, they're lying to you. It brings up my favorite meme. I'm going to have to find it. That one where the dad's just rolling in money. It's like my dad after I move out and stop leaving the hallway light on. That's how I feel. All right. In addition, we'll put in addition. If secondary is not connected to a load, the primary will consume very little power. All right, why not?
Because it's not fighting against the other magnetic lines.
Ooh, I like what you're thinking. All right, so we got an open. So what I'm saying is right now we have no current flow in the secondary and very, very little in the primary. But if I were to connect a little light right here, then suddenly current flows in the primary and the secondary. Or maybe I should just make this like a, I don't know, a little USB, and here's your cell phone. There we go. Charging the cell phone up. So that's your phone. Okay, there's a picture of your family on it. Okay. Sorry, family has legs. All right. Okay. The reason why is going back to what we talked about the other day, but in a different way. So we have Lenz's law, right? What does Lenz tell us? You're like, I don't know. What does it tell us? Oh my God, there was a weekend between here and there, and I had a lot to drink. Who's Lenz? All right. So as we'll talk about the primary, as the current or voltage, however you want to look at it, is building up in the primary, remember, and then it starts to fall off. Well, first of all, what happens as it's building up?
Magnetic lines and flux expand.
Okay, magnetic lines are expanding, but they're expanding individually as well, which is cutting across that loop, which is cutting across that loop. So before we look at this overall lines of flux that are forming as a whole, we've got, if you can think about it, lines of flux are happening within the coil. So we have lines of flux building up in the coil, which is then cutting across itself because of the little coils, which causes, you got it, counter EMF. All right, so the counter EMF says current's coming in, and it says,
I'm the one to oppose it.
no, you don't. No. So it opposes it. So as the current starts to come in, the counter EMF is saying, nope, you got to wait. How long do you wait? 5 time constants. See, you knew it'd come in handy someday. There it was. All right, five time constants. That's how long. So, all right, so it takes a while for the voltage to build up. I know this is weird, and you can remember this. It's Eli the Iceman, right? Oh, man, bad memories. So the voltage is going to lead and the current's going to lag, right? Okay, so voltage starts building up, but it takes a while before the current starts flowing, which is we're talking about current. So it takes a while for the current to start flowing. And then as it turns around and goes the other way, what happens? Counter EMF stops it. So the current, now it doesn't want to fall off, right? It wants to hold everything in place. So you have this fight going back and forth. And just left to itself, without the secondary involved, it's kind of what's happening over there. It's sort of fighting itself over here. And not a lot really happens, simply because of Lenz's law. Lenz's law keeps it from doing a whole lot of any good. But when we connect, I just blew that all to heck. When we connect, there we go. We connect our cell phone back up. Maybe I had white selected or something. We connect the cell phone back up, or whatever we're doing here. Now current starts to flow in the secondary. So we have lines of flux expand across that. That's just getting messy, which creates a current flow in the secondary. Well, what happens to the current that's created in the secondary? Well, it creates a counter EMF, and it creates its own lines of flux that reach out. And those lines of flux reach over across the primary and kill off the counter EMF that was causing the problem. Blows your mind. So you get rid of your counter EMF. So now current flows much easier in the whole circuit.
Wouldn't it cancel it out though?
It does, cancels it out.
So
That's
how
what I'm
does
saying.
it? So how does it receive? Like, it would cancel out the magnetic field of the primary.
Oh, it doesn't cancel out the magnetic field. It cancels out the counter EMF.
Okay.
Which, you can kind of look at it that way. I think that, yeah, you'd be safe. Say, okay, so the red lines of flux and the secondary cancel out the blue lines of flux.
But then the blue lines cancel out the red.
Yeah, I know. That's where I'm going. They're going to think now the blue ones cancel out the red, and then nothing happens. It just doesn't work that way. It's backwards is what it is. So if we really got into the left-hand rules of thumb and how it goes, then you would see that they're absolutely backwards, and so it cancels it out. So you induce the voltage in the second, cancel out the Lenz's law in the primary, and you have a more efficient circuit. Which is to say that, again, without a load on the secondary, without a circuit, with an open circuit on the secondary, no current flows through the secondary, so very little current also flows in the primary because of, we'll say, Lenz's law. As soon as you connect a load into the secondary, current flows in the secondary, which now current flowing in the secondary means that you have magnetic flux in the secondary, which cancels out the effects of the primary. Woo. Did that work?
So
All right.
The secondary.
I'm sorry. Can you hold your questions? No. Go ahead.
So
Until I know what I'm talking about.
Cancels out the counter EMF in the
Yes.
primary.
Yes.
So in the secondary, is there still counter EMF there, or is it just completely wiped out?
I think it kind of wipes it out for the most part. We're not going to analyze it, so it's just kind of considered
Alright, so it's
as
kind of like I just go up, flash, and done.
that's the way I go with it.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So if I write all this out, it might make some sense. I had one. In addition, if secondary is not connected to a load, the primary will consume very little power. Point number 2, counter EMF. Counter EMF prevents current from flowing in the primary when there is no load in the secondary. No load in the secondary. When the secondary is connected to a load, the magnetic field in the secondary counters the counter EMF in the primary and allows more current to flow in the primary. So when the secondary is connected to a load, the magnetic field in the secondary counters the counter EMF in the primary, and allows more current to flow in the primary. It allows more current to flow in the primary. I don't know if I want to write this. I can if you want me to, because that's kind of a weird thing. I saw it and I'm like, oh, I guess that makes sense, but I don't know. It says, consider the field. Consider the field as a power reservoir. So if we go up and look at kind of the picture of it, we got the field here. The magnetic field is a reservoir. If the secondary draws from the reservoir, then current must flow in the primary to fill the reservoir back up. Like I said, I don't know about that one. So if you like it, fine. If not, I don't either. All right. But take it. Yeah.
There's no power loss between the induction?
There actually is a little power loss.
Okay, so you don't want to keep adding, in like a bunch of coils together to induct.
But they do. You got to add them to do the job that you want them to do.
Right, so you have one coil and your other one, that's normal, but if you start adding like two coils next to each other?
You're going to see what happens. Yeah, you're going to see what happens a little bit.
Okay.
Because the thing you have to think about is you cannot create power. You're going to lose a little bit of power when you do this. So if you have one coil and you add two next to it, you got to have twice as much power in the primary as you would in the, well, it'd be secondary and tertiary at that point, because you can't just add power next to it. So, speaking of that, some people do that. They have, if you have overhead power lines near your house, they'll just take coils of wire and put them on a stick and just hold it up next to it. Serious. And you get, huh?
Charge your phone.
Yeah. Well, you can charge a whole house.
Yeah.
I don't know how much. It depends on how big your coil is. I think you get in big trouble for that. What's that?
Really, stealing electricity from the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't get in trouble for that.
It's free. It's just
It's in the air.
just magnetic lines of flux. Come on. All right. So I put therefore. Therefore, just to be clear, that would be highly illegal. Don't do that. Therefore, current flow in the primary is directly proportional. I guess this statement would make more sense if we use the reservoir theory. The more you pull out of the reservoir in the secondary, the more you got to put in the primary to keep the reservoir at the same level. But we live in California where we just dump all of our water anyway, so it doesn't matter. And then we don't get any more. And then we're like, well, what are you going to do? Well, I'll stop watering your lawn. So, therefore, current flow in the primary is directly proportional. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, directly proportional to the current flow in the secondary. To the current flow in the secondary. So that's your basics of a transformer. And as I've already said, transformers are used to step up, or step down voltage or current.
Kevin,
Yeah.
you were saying that if you add another coil next to a coil, it's technically there's a power loss there, correct?
Yeah, it depends on how you say power loss.
I guess what I'm saying is I understand how a transformer could step down voltage because you were saying that if you wanted this to be the secondary coil to be 12 volts, you would have to have 24 volts per 10 in the primary, or no?
Yes, you wouldn't want to go 12 to 12. That wouldn't make sense. Because why would you have a transformer then? But if you wanted to go 24 to 12, then you're going to have, well, that's what I'm going to show you, you're going to have different size coils.
The only time you'd want to do that is for electrical isolation.
Oh, good point. Yeah. The tip, I think, just went away. I'm having problems. How do you change the tip on this thing? Yeah, but how do you change them? You just stick them in there?
Yep. That's broke off.
Well, that's weird.
Return it.
Hmm.
Get a refund.
Yeah.
I feel like it must have went somewhere.
Gray on gray.
This doesn't fall apart. All right, we're fine with it. All right, transformers. Use step up or step down. So the ratio of the EMF of the primary, the ratio of the EMF, electromotive force, or I could have said voltage, in the primary to the EMF in the secondary is equal, so it's the ratio, so EMF primary dot dot EMF secondary is equal to the ratio of the number of turns in the primary to the number of turns in the secondary. Which is another way of saying the ratio is, let me see, primary turns to secondary turns. Or another way of saying it is, so if the primary has 100 turns, and the secondary has 200 turns, the EMF in the secondary, or the voltage in the secondary, is twice that of the primary. So if the primary has 100 turns and the secondary has 200, so now we've got a mystery. You got one primary's got half as many as the secondary. You're stepping up the voltage, so you have twice as much voltage. Gotta move this? You sure?
Hey Kevin,
Yeah.
you said current flow in the primary is directly proportional to the current flow in the secondary.
Yes.
But if you're stepping up the voltage, isn't current going to go down?
Did I say current though? I said voltage.
Just above 5, right at the top of the page.
When the secondary is connected to load, the magnetic field in the secondary
Yeah.
counters EMF in the primary and allows more current to flow in the primary. Therefore, current flow in the primary is directly proportional to the current flow in the secondary.
That doesn't take into account the ratio of turns.
It doesn't. So it could be true and it could be false,
Okay.
depending on the next formula.
I figured we were going to go over it, but
Yes.
All right, let's see here. Formula. The formula, well, I have formula for voltage. We'll just go with what I wrote for voltage. Is E over P memorizing this program. E over P, E over S equals N of P over N of S. Which is to say, EP is, E is voltage primary. ES is voltage in secondary. N is number of turns. In primary. And S is number of turns in secondary. And that is the break time.